Hola and hello, it's Rob Ryan and it's Stoppage Time. It's Friday, April 19th, and it's time to drop into your feed to talk about this week's roundup of a couple of big issues. Today I'm going to give some shout outs and I'm going to finish up with a book recommendation like always. Think of this as a less formal conversation between us every week outside the confines of our typical Entrepreneurial Thinkers podcast, as a way for us to just celebrate that little bit of time left between the heavy work of your week and the weekend, or as we say in soccer or football, which I am a huge fan of, stoppage time. That's the time between the end of your work week and your weekend. So we're going to jump in this week. We've got two big topics, could not be more diametrically opposed. Then I'm going to do some shout outs about some events and some friends, and then I'll drop in my book recommendation as usual at the end of the show. So first things first, two topics, and I said, boy, diametrically opposed. First one, women's sports. Again, you're saying, my goodness, didn't we just talk about women's sports last week? We did, and honestly, I did not anticipate that we'd be back talking about women's sports again this week. But one, that shows you kind of where that is at in the social consciousness of at least the United States, but if not the world right now. And two, it's just a big, huge topic that's really important to kind of dive into, but also peel back the numbers a little bit and understand more specifically, so we can be a little bit better informed, not just sports consumers, but general people, right? So let's talk about why it was in the news again. It was in the news again this week because we had the WNBA Draft on, I think it was Monday or Tuesday of this week, and the viewership numbers for the WNBA Draft this year were 4 times higher than the viewership on television last year. 2.45 million people tuned into the draft this year, as opposed to last year's 400,000 or 500,000 people that watched. So incredible growth across TV viewership, as we talked about last week with the women's college basketball tournaments. But here's the thing that got everybody on the internet up in arms. They quickly released the annual pay averages on the first contract for new rookie and number one draft pick, Caitlin Clark. And the average worked out to about $80,000 US per year. For her basketball services for the 4-year average of the contract. And immediately the internet wanted to compare that to the number one draft pick from the NBA men's draft last year, whose average annual earnings across the 4 years of his rookie contract were about $12 million a year. So about $12 million a year for the man, about $80,000 a year for the woman. Of course, the internet just exploded. Everybody was up in arms from every potential angle that this could be attacked or dissected, whether it was good, bad, right, wrong. Everybody had an opinion. And I have mine too. But what I want to do is inject a little bit of context and some factual history just to help us understand this and how we got here moment kind of versus also where we're going. So let's talk about how we got here, right? The NBA itself is about 75 years old. The WNBA, I think, is about 26, 27 years old. If we go back in the NBA's not too distant past, during my lifetime, as recently as say the middle 1980s, NBA playoff games right now, which are everywhere, but NBA playoff television games weren't even on live television consistently. They were usually what they used to call tape delayed. They were basically recorded and then played back whenever the network had space in their regular programming. And that, again, that's in my lifetime. That's like when I was in high school, mid 1980s. Second thing is if you go back a little bit further, even to the 1970s. So again, about the same age era for the NBA, 26, 27, 28 years old in existence, as is the WNBA now. Players typically back then, most players in the league would have had second jobs during the offseason to essentially supplement their income. So part of it is, as JJ Redick said on a podcast with LeBron James this past week, it's just time and maturity. It's just this idea that the league, the WNBA has to have time on its side and has to just kind of continue to mature its business models. Having said that, as Julie Ehrman, CEO, president of my beloved Angel City Women's Football Club here in Los Angeles, posted about it this week, hey, wow, we've got work to do, right? With like a little clip that showed the comparative salaries of those two players, the man versus the woman. And that's true, and there is work to do. Right. And the truth is, as we talked about last week, there is just an inevitable upward trajectory of women's sports that's happening. It's been coming for a few years. It's explosively going forward from here. The next 25 years, we'll see, I would suggest, probably the WNBA, much like the NWSL, see franchise valuations, wages, collective bargaining amongst unions on behalf of the players all skyrocket. And so I would argue that maybe by the time the WNBA hits its 50th anniversary, it will perhaps have been equal or surpassed where the NBA would have been at that same period in time. So it's on a good trajectory. There inevitably is a lot of work to do, but let's not worry too much about Caitlin Clark in this particular example, because this week was also announced that she signed an 8-figure, which means a $10 million per year minimum shoe contract and brand sponsorship deal with Nike. So Caitlin's going to get paid very, very well to play basketball. And frankly, on that average $80,000 salary, as my friend Robin Ward, who's a proud Indianan, said, she could live pretty well in Indianapolis on that $80,000 a year salary, but she's not going to need to use that salary because she's going to have plenty of money in the bank. And she will, over the course of her career, earn more money, and WNBA players will be increasingly valued more. But part of it is the league just simply needs to grow. The franchises need to become more focused and more independently owned. I think 3 or 4 of the franchises are still affiliated with NBA teams and NBA owners. So the league as a whole just needs to expand. There needs to be more opportunity for women's basketball at the professional level. And then we will see all these things kind of progressively increase. But for this week, it was like the hot topic across business and sociocultural media. And so I couldn't not talk about it, knowing how much passion I have for these types of things. Now, second topic of the week. And this is as hard a right turn pivot topically as you could possibly do. But we're going to talk about death. And we're not just going to talk about death. We're going to talk about death and kind of the ecosystem of caregiving that goes around both those that are dying, as well as the ecosystem of caregiving in and of itself, and the support and resources that the caregivers need as they provide the care and support to those who are dying. I had an incredible conversation with Maura McInerney Rowley this week. She's a Twitter friend. She's obsessed with the entrepreneurial opportunities and applying her entrepreneurial thinking processes into this market. Having said that, it's not the first time I've ever heard of this market, right? So maybe not so specifically around death or around death and caregiving support, but I've heard from investor friends and I've heard from friends who are involved in the industry numerous times over the last handful of years about this silver economy or graying economy or aging ecosystem or aging economy. So there is a massive demographic shift happening in the US as we age as a population, combined with the fact that we are all living longer, not necessarily healthier, but we're living longer, right? And that is going to create an exceptional burden on our healthcare systems, on us and our family structure, which is so notoriously kind of independent in US American culture. And so there is a massive need at the individual level, at the human level, which is what Maura is obsessively focused on. And then there is just a market opportunity from a pure entrepreneurial business standpoint, which I find to be just a fascinating juxtaposition of kind of human experiences meeting capital market opportunities. And so it was one of the reasons when I saw Maura tweeting about the fact that she was doing some customer discovery and she was curious if there were people in her network who would be willing to sit down with her for a private one-on-one interview and talk about death experiences that they've had in their lives. She polled and was looking for, like, is there anybody who's experienced a death in their immediate family or multiple deaths and or death of a pet or any of those things? And I literally tweeted back at her and I was like, all of those things. And I'm happy to talk about them openly. So it was a really deeply personal, emotional, but also kind of cathartic conversation to have with someone who is clearly such an empathetic thinker around these topics. But then the entrepreneur in me kicked in, right? And the mentor and coach in me kicked in at the end. And I really was obsessed with wanting to understand her, why Maura, why this and why this now, right? Why is she working on that? So she's deep in discovery. When she comes out of discovery, cross our fingers, we'll have her on the Entrepreneurial Thinkers podcast and we'll get more of her story and we'll dive more deeply into this. But it was on my mind this week because having recently lost someone in our extended family and had a lot of conversations about death, being someone myself who lost both my parents back when I was about in my 38th year, so between 38 and 39, I've been hyper conscious of my own mortality, of all of our mortality, of the urgency of like just kind of life ever since then, not in a morbid or sad or macabre way, but just in and actually in a positive and optimistic way, as I've lived these 17 years since my parents passed away. And I just thought like, wow, if I could help Maura to process through this and think of things that I know my sisters would have benefited from as my mom was aging and passed away, or that I would have benefited from when my dad and my mom passed away, or that friends in extended family would have benefited from as elders in their family passed away on family holidays, and just all the myriad of experiences that we go through and that we don't think about. And frankly, a lot of our subcultures don't even want to talk about until it's too late, until it happens. And to think that there is someone as caring and smart and hardworking and earnest as Maura out there in the world that's working on these things was really, really encouraging to me. So that's our big two topics. Again, couldn't have been more different. Now I want to drop in and I want to hit on a couple of, just bear with me a second as I look at my notes because I don't want to forget anybody. I want to give a couple shout outs. So this is kind of a new twist this week. I'm going to add this in occasionally. I want to give some shout outs to some friends who are doing some really cool things here in Los Angeles and in New York. So first things first, if you're in New York City or LA and you're looking to meet with other entrepreneurs, investors, and build some community, you got to check out the Tech Breakfast Clubs. You can look this up on Twitter, online, anywhere. You can find my guy Morgan Barrett on Twitter or on other social media platforms, LinkedIn. I think, shout out Morgan, I think it's your birthday this week. So happy birthday, young fella. I'm sure I'll see you in like 3 weeks at La Gondola in Beverly Hills for dinner. But the Tech Breakfast Clubs are awesome. I was fortunate enough to have sat with him here for breakfast, the two of us, back in 2021 in Hollywood when we first met in my neighborhood, and he posited this idea of these gatherings, and now these things have taken off like wildfire. So if you're in LA or New York City, don't forget to check out Tech Breakfast Club meetings. If you're in LA and you're interested in getting together with founders, entrepreneurs, investors, leaders in small groups and in different settings, or if you also also love kind of deep dive founder stories about some of the most notable founders in the history of business, go check out my guy, Justin Gordon. Justin, in his Just Go Grind community, is getting ready to launch some events. He's doing a hike here in my neighborhood this weekend in Hollywood. And so I'm super excited to see where he takes this and what he does with it. Two more shout outs. Third shout out, if you're looking to do more partnership work or launch new initiatives, programs, nonprofits, collaborations between governments, universities, private sector companies. If you're an investor looking to get involved in life sciences and health tech here in LA, you got to go find my guy, Dave Whalen, online. Dave is the former CEO of Bioscience LA. He is maybe the most active relationship builder connector in Southern California in this space. He's all over social media. There's literally not a platform you can't find him on. So just look up Dave Whalen, Life Sciences, or go search the old CEO title at Bioscience LA, and you'll find something that connects you to him. But go find him right now because it's an incredible time in the industry here in Southern California, and he is our OG leader. So there's that. If you're looking for a program, final note, if you're looking for a program to get yourself involved in as a founder, to get some support for your company this summer, UCLA Venture Accelerator Summer Activate program, their application is open for about 8 or 10 more days from the time that this gets published on the 19th. My friend Trish Halamaderis, who's a former guest of the podcast and an awesome catalyzer here in the Southern California and LA ecosystem, is behind the great programs to support entrepreneurs over at UCLA. So make sure you do that. Okay, so finally, here we go. To wrap up stoppage time for this week, I got to drop my book recommendation. My book recommendation this week, long title, is Codebreaker. That's how I refer to the book. But the formal title is Codebreaker, Jennifer Doudna, Gene Editing, and the Future of the Human Race by Walter Isaacson. Who is Jennifer Doudna and why should you care? Jennifer is a Nobel Prize winning scientist who, along with her team, were basically the people who discovered and created the CRISPR DNA human gene editing tools. Breakthrough science. I first heard about Jennifer as a character while my daughter was attending UC Berkeley, because Jennifer had done some work and been resident at Berkeley for years. I later heard her names come up again repeatedly during the pandemic, during our COVID pandemic, because our mRNA vaccines, these breakthrough synthetic vaccines that we're able to create so much more efficiently, so much more effectively, so much more rapidly, to help us fight disease and pandemic outbreaks like COVID, are really only capable because of these CRISPR technologies. So we have her and her team to thank for some of the breakthroughs that literally are keeping millions and millions of us alive in this kind of uncertain world that we live in. So I love stories about people. I love stories about how we got here. I'm not a science guy, but I am genuinely a curious person about things that I don't know much about and I don't understand. And so if you enjoy any of those things like I do, you'll enjoy this book about Jennifer by the incomparable biographer Walter Isaacson. So that's it, folks. That's it for this week. That's it for episode 2 of Stoppage Time. I hope you max out and take advantage of your stoppage time in your life this week and today. And you know where to find me, here or on Entrepreneurial Thinkers. I always ask you kindly to like, follow, subscribe, share both our shows with your friends, with people in your networks, so that we can just have more people enjoy and be inspired by what we're talking about and join the conversation with us. So peace. Have a great day. We'll see you next week.